Have you ever held something so powerful it could heal millions, yet silently destroy you? She did, and she kept holding it until it took her life. Marie Curie didn't just change science. She broke the laws of society, rewrote the rules of academia, and paid the ultimate price for discovery. But long before the Nobel Prizes, long before the glowing elements, she was just a little girl in Warsaw, dreaming under a broken roof, with a hunger for knowledge no poverty could silence. This is her full story. In the cold heart of Russian-occupied Poland, on November 7, 1867, a baby girl was born into silence. No fireworks, no celebration. Just the sound of snow falling on the rooftops of Warsaw. Her name? Maria Sklodowska. But one day, the world would know her as Marie Curie, the woman who gave light to the darkest parts of science and paid the price with her own life. But that journey began in shadows. Marie was the youngest of 5 siblings in a home filled with books, but not with bread. Her parents were teachers, fiercely educated, fiercely proud, and quietly broken by the weight of poverty and political oppression. Her father, the Ladislaw, taught mathematics and physics, but his job was unstable, constantly undermined by Russian authorities who mistrusted educated Poles. And her mother, Bronislawa, ran a prestigious boarding school for girls until tuberculosis took her strength and then her life. Marie was just 10 years old when she stood at her mother's funeral. Imagine being 10 and learning what loss means before you've even learned how to spell the word. From that day forward, she changed. She stopped playing. She stopped smiling. Her diary, the only place she could safely speak, became her silent world. In one entry she wrote, "There's nothing more terrible than losing your mother. It crushes the soul and freezes the heart." But Marie didn't collapse under pain. She converted it into purpose. At school, she was brilliant. Not just good, not just gifted, but unstoppable. In a male-dominated world where girls were taught to sew, she wanted to solve. Where others learned verses, she learned formulas. But being gifted in Poland, especially as a girl, was like having wings in a cage. The Russian Empire, which controlled Poland at the time, banned Polish language, culture, and especially higher education for women. So what did Marie do? She joined the Flying University. It wasn't in the sky. It was underground, literally. A secret school for women, hidden in homes, constantly changing location to escape the Russian secret police. There, by candlelight, Marie and other brilliant young women studied physics, chemistry, and forbidden knowledge. Every page they turned was a political act. Every formula memorized was a protest. Every night of study was dangerous. But Marie never blinked, never paused. Knowledge wasn't just her goal. It was her rebellion. The problem wasn't her intelligence. It was the world around her. Her sister Bronya dreamed of becoming a doctor, but they had no money. So the two sisters made a pact. Marie would work as a governess, send her earnings to support Bronya's medical education in Paris. Then, Bronya would support Marie in return. And so at just 17, Marie left home to work in villages far from Warsaw. She taught children of wealthy families by day and studied thermodynamics by lamplight each night. She read Newton, Lavoisier, and Faraday, not because anyone asked her to, but because she had to. Something deep inside her whispered, "One day, the world will need me to understand this." For 5 long years, she lived this life. Isolated, overworked, unpaid at times, disrespected as a woman, and once even heartbroken when the family she worked for refused to let her marry their son because she was a mere governess. But pain always became fuel for Marie. She never begged, never complained, only wrote in her journal, "There is no hope without struggle, and there is no science without sacrifice." Finally, in 1891, at the age of 24, she had saved enough money. She packed everything she had, 2 dresses, some books, and a dream, and boarded a train to Paris. No one cheered her at the station. No one called her a genius. But that quiet girl, that Polish immigrant with holes in her shoes, was about to change science forever. The moment Jasmine Crockett laid the evidence on the table, a quiet storm began brewing behind the scenes. While the cameras focused on the stunned silence in the courtroom and Donald Trump Jr.'s suddenly pale face, another story was beginning to unfold. A story the public didn't see right away. But it was real, And it was chaotic. Inside Trump Tower, phones started ringing. Fast. Furious. Staffers who were used to controlling the narrative suddenly found themselves trying to contain a story they didn't expect and couldn't escape. The $3.2 million bombshell wasn't just about Don Jr.'s personal business. It raised questions about the Trump family's entire financial web. Who else knew? Who helped move the money? And was the former president himself involved? The first call was from a senior campaign advisor. "We got to kill this story now, or we're finished." But there was no way to kill it. Jasmine Crockett had dropped receipts, and the media had already gone into overdrive. On one channel, commentators broke down the timeline of money transfers. On another, legal analysts debated whether Don Jr. could be charged. Social media exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Trump Jr. Money Trail and hashtag Crockett Bombshell were trending within the hour. Inside Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump Sr. was pacing, furious, shouting at the TV. "They planned this. That woman, she planned this like a show." He was right about one thing. Jasmine had been prepared. Every word, every document, every pause, calculated. Because this wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth. Trump called in his inner circle. His lawyers, his PR team, even family members. They huddled in a private conference room, doors locked. The mood was tense. Some staffers tried to stay calm, suggesting they deny everything. Label it a political hit job. Others warned that Crockett had proof, not just speculation. And the documents she showed, they were real. Verifiable. Signed. Trump snapped. "Then we bury her. We find her weakness. We go after her." But no one in the room responded. Because even they knew Jasmine wasn't afraid of backlash. She had built her career standing up to power. And now she had the whole country watching. Meanwhile, Don Jr. wasn't doing any better. Inside his Manhattan apartment, he sat in front of a laptop, watching the moment on replay. Crockett's voice, calm and direct, echoed in the background. He looked stunned, like someone who had been certain no one would ever catch him. His phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from friends, business partners, lawyers. One message stood out. "There's more coming." It wasn't from a known number. But the threat was clear. This wasn't the end. Jasmine had cracked open the door. Others were going to walk through it. At the Capitol, Crockett's team kept working. Her office was flooded with emails, some angry, some supportive, but many from whistleblowers. Former employees of Trump-linked companies. Accountants. Lawyers. They were offering tips. Some were anonymous, but others were ready to go public. Jasmine knew this was turning into something bigger than she expected. What began as a single $3.2 million transaction was now unraveling into a network of fraud, cover-ups, and political payoffs. She gathered her team. "We don't back down. But we do this right. Step by step. No leaks, no drama. We let the truth speak for itself." As Crockett worked quietly, the Trump team was doing the opposite. They flooded the media with counter-narratives. Trump's spokesperson claimed the documents were fake. Another claimed it was a standard business deal. But when reporters asked for proof, they had none. In private, Trump's lawyers were scrambling. They contacted every firm associated with the financial transfers. They ordered non-disclosure agreements, tried to scrub digital trails. But it was too late. Screenshots, digital records, signed contracts, they were already archived. Crockett's team had submitted everything to the Oversight Committee and the Department of Justice. Then came the panic. On day 3, after Crockett's revelation, a confidential memo leaked. Written by one of Trump Jr.'s attorneys, it admitted that the transactions were real, but not intended to appear misleading. That phrase was enough to set off alarm bells. It was a backdoor confession, and legal experts began lining up to explain what it could mean. CNN, MSNBC, even conservative outlets couldn't ignore it anymore. Everywhere Donald Trump turned, the walls seemed to close in. In a last-ditch effort to control the story, Trump scheduled a surprise interview, live, prime time. His team thought it would help. They believed if he spoke directly to the people, he could regain control. But they didn't expect what happened next. It was 8:02 p.m. The cameras rolled. The anchor began, "Mr. Trump, America is watching. What's your response to the documents Congresswoman Crockett revealed this week?" Trump's face was tight. He was sweating. His voice shook slightly as he started. "This whole thing is a lie. A setup. Jasmine Crockett should be investigated, not my son." But then he made a mistake. A big one. He said, "That deal, they've taken it out of context. The Cayman transfer was a donation, not business." The anchor blinked. A donation? From who? Trump realized too late that he had said too much. Admitting to a transfer on live television was confirmation. Lawyers watching at home sat up. Because if it was a donation, it had to be declared under FEC rules. And it hadn't been. That meant it was illegal. The internet lit up. Within minutes, Crockett's team clipped the quote and posted it with the words, "He just confessed." Hashtags exploded again. Hashtag Trump confesses began trending globally. Back at her office, Jasmine watched quietly. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply turned to her staff and said, "He just handed us the next chapter." That night, political analysts said they hadn't seen a moment like this since Watergate. The comparison wasn't about the crime. It was about the moment a lie began to unravel. And it all started with Crockett's quiet confidence, her refusal to back down, her relentless focus on the facts. In the following hours, a new wave of whistleblowers emerged. A former banker connected to the Cayman transfer. A real estate attorney who had seen similar shell deals. They were all ready to speak, and Jasmine was ready to listen. The Trump family, once known for controlling every room they entered, now found themselves in a corner. Not because of noise, but because of one woman with a folder full of truth and a voice that wouldn't shake. And while Trump raged on live TV, while his team panicked in backrooms, while Don Jr. went silent on social media, Jasmine Crockett began preparing her next statement. The investigation wasn't over. It had just begun. They were not just partners in science. They were partners in soul. Marie and Pierre Curie. Two minds that found harmony not just in discovery, but in devotion. After their marriage in 1895, the Curies built a life that was nothing short of revolutionary. Not in grandeur, but in sacrifice. There were no luxurious halls or golden awards in those early days. Only a rickety wooden shed that pretended to be a laboratory. Freezing in winter, sweltering in summer. Day and night they toiled, boiling pitchblende in huge cauldrons, inhaling fumes, burning hands, staining clothes. Marie once wrote, "Sometimes we work through the night, not feeling the cold, not feeling the hunger. Only the burning question in our hearts." And yet there was joy in their shared laughter, in the tiny sparks of discovery, in raising their daughter, Erin, surrounded by books, beakers, and quiet brilliance. Then came the moment that changed the world. They had discovered radium, a substance that glowed with an eerie, magical light, a substance that would bring hope and death. Their findings shook the scientific world. In 1903, both Pierre and Marie were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics, the first couple in history to win such a distinction. But fame didn't touch them. They remained in the same modest home, took no patent, made no money. When asked why, Marie simply said, "Radium is for all humanity." But fate, cruel and cold, had other plans. It was April 19, 1906. Pierre Curie, deep in thought, crossed a wet, crowded street. He slipped and fell under a heavy horse-drawn wagon. A single crack to the skull. Instant death. The world lost a genius. Marie lost her universe. She didn't scream. She didn't cry in public. She walked behind the casket, alone, pale, silent. Her black dress soaked with rain. Her diary would later whisper the grief she never said aloud. "I am alone, and I have lost the one who was my entire life." For weeks, Marie didn't speak to anyone. She shut herself inside her laboratory, trying to work, trying to breathe. She refused offers of charity, honors, pensions. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted him. But in her sorrow, something powerful was reborn. A fire, a purpose. She would continue their work. For Pierre, for science, for the world. In 1906, just months after the tragedy. The University of Paris offered Marie the professorship that had once belonged to her husband. It was an unprecedented moment. Marie Curie, a woman, a widow, a foreigner, became the first female professor at the Sorbonne. Her first lecture? She began not with facts or formulas. She began with Pierre's name. And as she spoke of atoms, of energy, of invisible light, she spoke with a broken voice, but an unbreakable spirit. In those years of grief, Marie Curie did more than mourn. She lit a torch in the darkness of science. She proved that a woman could rise, could teach, could lead even when the world had tried to crush her soul. She had no armor but knowledge, no power but her mind, no support but memory. Marie Curie, once hidden in the shadow of her husband's brilliance, now stood alone, a widow, a mother, and a scientist in a man's world. After Pierre's death, many expected her to retreat, to vanish into mourning. But Marie did not vanish. She ascended. In a world where women were rarely allowed to learn, she stood at the helm of science. Lecturing halls packed with skeptical men, doubting her, questioning her right to be there. But she never raised her voice. She never demanded respect. She earned it with each lecture, each discovery, each sleepless night in the laboratory. Marie resumed her and Pierre's research into radioactivity, a term she herself had coined. She worked endlessly. Her hands always smelled of chemicals. Her eyes strained under candlelight. She was often sick, coughing, feverish, pale, but she refused to stop. Then, in 1911, 5 years after losing Pierre, came the moment that would shake the world again. The Nobel Committee reached out. Marie Curie had just become the first person in history to win 2 Nobel Prizes, one in physics, now one in chemistry, for her discovery of radium and polonium, and her relentless investigation into their properties. The world cheered, but some whispered. Rumors spread of a personal affair with physicist Paul Langevin, a married man. Marie's private pain became public ammunition. She was hounded. Crowds gathered outside her home. Stones were thrown at her windows. Papers didn't call her a genius. They called her a foreign temptress. One morning, she found a threatening letter in her mailbox. It read, "You are not welcome in our country. Go back to where you came from." She was devastated. But in the silence of humiliation, she didn't respond with rage. She responded with brilliance. Even when the Nobel Committee advised her to stay away from the award ceremony due to the scandal, she said, "I have been honored for my work, not my life." And she went. She stood in Stockholm, alone, dignified, unapologetic. The room was filled with suits and silence until she spoke. She spoke of radium, atoms, and the possibility that one day humans might harness radiation to fight disease. They had tried to erase her with shame. Instead, she engraved herself deeper into history. Marie Curie didn't just win 2 Nobels. She survived them. She survived the death of her love. She survived the judgment of society. And she became a symbol of scientific defiance, of intellect over insult, of perseverance over prejudice. The war didn't knock on Marie Curie's door. It kicked it down. In 1914, as the world collapsed into the flames of the First World War, France called its sons to battle. But one mother, one widow, one scientist, answered the call with something far more powerful than bullets: light. Wounded soldiers would die not just from injury, but from ignorance. Shrapnel buried deep inside bodies couldn't be found fast enough. There were no maps of the human body, no time, no tools. Marie Curie had an idea, not of destruction, but of illumination. She remembered the X-rays, those invisible rays, born from the same radioactive energy she studied. If they could see through flesh, they could save lives. So she built machines with her own hands, rented a car, modified it, turned it into a mobile radiology unit, the first of its kind. They called it the Little Curie. She didn't stop at 1. She built 20. Then she trained women, not soldiers, not doctors, just women like herself in radiology. She created an army of healers, an army of light. And then Marie, now in her 40s, left the safety of her lab and drove to the front lines herself. She stood among the blood and the mud, hands steady, eyes sharp. She scanned shattered ribs, found hidden bullets, saved lives, day after day, night after night. Sometimes the power failed, so she lit candles. Sometimes her own daughter, Erin, barely a teenager, stood beside her holding supplies. She didn't ask for recognition. She didn't publish papers. She served. In total, over 1 million soldiers were x-rayed because of Marie Curie. She received no medal, no official title, but the wounded called her something greater than Madame Curie. They called her the woman who saw what others could not. She could have stayed behind her books, but instead, she walked into the fire, not with a weapon, but with wisdom. And when the war ended, when the guns finally fell silent, Marie Curie had saved more lives than any general ever could. And yet, she returned to her lab quietly, not as a war hero, but as a mother of invention, a scientist, a servant of humanity. The war had ended, but for Marie Curie, the battle was never over. Not against an enemy of nations, but against the invisible forces she had uncovered decades earlier. Years of exposure to radioactive elements had taken their toll. In her journals, the ink had begun to fade, but her body had begun to fade too. Her bones ached, her eyesight dimmed, her energy, once unstoppable, began to flicker. Marie Curie was dying, not from age, but from her discovery, the very thing she devoted her life to, the element that won her 2 Nobel Prizes, that changed science forever, was slowly poisoning her from within. But she never regretted it. In her final years, she didn't retire. She didn't rest. She taught. She wrote. She traveled the world, advocating for women in science, breaking more barriers with her voice than she ever had with her hands. She helped build research institutions, raised funds for radium, and pushed the boundaries of science further. Even as her body weakened, she smiled through the pain. She stood through the exhaustion. She burned quietly, like a dying star still illuminating the sky. On July 4th, 1934, Marie Curie passed away. The cause? Aplastic anemia, a rare condition caused by prolonged radiation exposure. There was no funeral parade, no gold-plated statues, just a simple grave beside her beloved Pierre. But her legacy? It was immortal. Underscore 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 underscore. She was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, the only person ever to win it twice in 2 different sciences. She coined the term radioactivity. She opened the door for medical imaging, cancer treatment, and nuclear physics. And she did it all in a world that told her, you can't. She didn't just teach science. She taught humanity that genius has no gender, that knowledge has no borders, that love, loss, and purpose can live inside the same human heart. She glowed, not because of the radium, but because of what she stood for: courage, sacrifice, truth, legacy. And that beauty still glows today. In every X-ray machine, in every cancer treatment, in every little girl who picks up a microscope and dares to believe she belongs. If this story moved you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Behind the Genius, where we reveal the real lives behind the legends of science. Every week, a new story, a new soul.